benefit to the perm, and the perm is just like a neutral. The AF is bad, the K is good. You don't vote for the perm because it's just a neutral force that undercuts any solvency either side might have. So you can't do the K. And insofar as he didn't say that the perm was a test of competitiveness, you like look to my analysis because like he just didn't say that it was a test of competitiveness. So then on the framework that it's like self-serving and arbitrary, the framework like the affirmative can run other strats. They could run like a test, like they could like run some type of like critical AC that talks about how like, oh, maybe we're talking about a democracy, but we're not reifying a democracy. That's not what my opponent does. My opponent is literally saying state good. So then you can extend the impact to the biopolitics. These are voters right here. Like the endpoint, the Dean 04 card, which is the endpoint of biopolitics, is a state in which legal order is indistinguishable from bare life. Insofar as my opponent has not responded to these arguments, and especially this Agamben 98 card, that there's no value to life, he's conceding that the state is bad and that state control is bad. And insofar as the plan is an action of state control, it links into the K right there. So it's a secondary link. So then onto the alternative, you can extend the alternative. My opponent says that you reject the permutation to alter the alternative, but you can cross-apply the argument that the permutation is methodologically inconsistent with the K. He cross-applied the Taylor evidence that says that this is a disadvantage for the alt, but the alt solves for the Taylor evidence because it's a reorientation away from the idea, and that's basically what the K is saying on the F. So then he made another link turn that says like this shows you that the AF is not uniquely bad, but like the link is specific to the AF because I'm saying you don't. If he had not defended democracy in his 1AC, I wouldn't have read this K because there would have been no link. Insofar as he defends democracy as like a good idea, then he links into the K. So then onto the affirmative, you can extend the cross-application I made of like the cap K, specifically the Heinz 5 card, and you can extend the argumentation that I made there, that the affirmative, like you either do the K, which is good, and if you don't do the K, the AC turns itself, because insofar as the impact of biopolitics is a state in which you get fair life, then any action of the state is bad. And because he conceded that argument, you're gonna vote on state bad. He makes this argument that like, that the AC's policies are materially good in the short run, but that doesn't matter because the end point of biopolitics is a state in which legal order, he's prioritizing people in the now from people in the future, which like makes no sense because if you just prioritize what might be good now, you're leading to like an undescribably bad future. Also, like the state cannot check itself. Like he's saying that the state can just like make all these problems, but these are problems of institutional like state control. And so insofar as the state can't check itself because it's essentially motivated to power over the people, the state is not going to be able to make a good action in the short term or in the long term. So you're gonna vote for the K there. So the reasons you're voting neg is on the theory. He drops the voters, so it's just like a neg voter and he doesn't ever impact to the voters. So you vote neg on theory, you don't vote at all. And then you can vote on the K if you don't buy the theory argumentation because he drops the impact cards and concedes that the endpoint of the state is bare life.
102. Theory. Theory then the K. I'll just do the case extension and analysis on the K.
Okay.
Everyone ready?
Yep.
Okay.
I meet their explanation. The interpretation is that you can't read spikes that have valid implications. None of these spikes that the affirmative read have valid implications. I read paradigm issues for the one which don't have valid implications because it wasn't actually a theory. It just sets up arguments that I could potentially make in the one error, which isn't what any of their views is about, which means I meet the theory of their interpretation. The other spikes was just a counter interpretation of potential 1 and C theory argument, which obviously isn't offensive and isn't relevant to the round unless they read that theory, and it's still not offense for me, which means I meet their interpretation. The disclosure arguments don't make sense. They don't disclose and don't even have a wiki, and it's not part of their interpretation, so it's not relevant to the question of whether or not spikes are good or bad. Last is the counter solves all of their offenses. The violation with the ad claims that they're not offensive. All their strategy arguments are predicated on the fact that it would say that certain next strategies are drop the debater, so they wouldn't be able to read them. But insofar as they were just defensive arguments that would set up potential one error arguments that does not exclude anything in the 1 and 2, which is what their strategy argument about. The net benefit is times 2. The 1 error is super short, so I need the ability to have some arguments in the 1 and 2 that I can leverage in the 1 error times 2 always all their impacts. A1 is most verifiable and quantifiable because you can actually determine it even if we have the same amount of time. It's a question of unequal time distribution and controls the internal link to other whereas things like stress are sort of non-verifiable and you don't know. They also don't have an abuse story and they're super vague on the interpretation. You shouldn't vote on it. The critique. You should frame the debate through the conceded perm belt when they have no unique link to the affirmative, or why the state or why contingent uses of the state are uniquely bad, and they've conceded multiple examples of instances in which the state has done things that have not necessarily reified or solidified the state. Those are all the examples: desegregation of the armed forces, the abolition of slavery, extension of voting rights. All these are good things that do not necessarily reify the state, but are still things that the alternative would reject, which is a massive dissent. The alternative, but if their argument is that we have to reject any instance of the state, that proves the alternative cannot solve because there are tons of instances of the state being used in the status quo, and the state's taking action, such as all of those examples, which if the alternative can overcome, they can overcome the small inclusion in the affirmative. They have no reason the affirmative reifies the state. They're not all instances of state power are bad. We can continually use the state without saying that democracy or the state is always good. For example, the affirmative is an example of its link terms, the conceded link term, because it exposes the flaws of the state, i.e. ways in which government officials are corrupt, which shows the way in which the government unequally exercises sovereign power, which proves continued use of the state don't necessarily reify or solidify the state, which answers a lot of their arguments. The methodological inconsistency argument doesn't make any sense. It presumes they're winning a unique link to the affirmative. If the extent of their link is you use the state, that is impacted by all of our arguments above, and it is resolved by the permutation insofar as the alternative can overcome instances of the state in the status quo. Last is the alternative fails. What does the alternative even mean? There's no alternative explanation. What does it mean to analyze the world through class relations? Generally, that would mean that would justify contingency is inconsistent with the Gottman's theory, which justifies resolving material conditions like the affirmative by deterring government officials from being corrupt, which justifies the necessity of contingent use in the status quo. They have no explanation of how the app leads to long-term solidification of the state, insofar as we can reject the state in every other instance, but contingently use it in this one instance to resolve material harms, which means that insofar as they don't have a specific link to the affirmative, the case outweighs, and you can vote out on the perm.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a good debate. I ended up voting AF. I think the AF is ahead on a couple of important issues on the critique. First, that there is something uniquely bad about the AF, uniquely biopolitical. I don't think the neg has won a reason the AF reifies, solidifies, legitimates the state in any capacity beyond what the status quo does, and a lot of other actions in the status quo that do that. which isn't terminal for you. Like, you could still win the debate even with a generic link like rights or democracy. But then you would have to prove that the little addition that the AF makes, even if not unique, is enough of an impact to outweigh the case. Or you would need to prove the alternative is mutually exclusive and for that reason solves a bunch of impacts that the AF can't and thus outweighs. If you don't do either of those two things, I think it's going to be pretty hard to win without a specific link, and I think I can vote on the perm. I don't think that that you get there on the weighing. I think the impacts were kind of nebulous, and in fact there was one point in the 2NR when you said the AF will lead to an undescribably bad future, and I thought that's right, you're not really describing what the bad future is. I want more examples, you know, what in, especially in modern democracies, what does bare life look like? Like, what is the impact? Is it poverty? Is it disease? Is it war? Is it, you know, make a real, like, and you don't have to have a whole scenario, right, like you would for a dis-ad, but have some examples of what you mean when you say biopolitics causes bare life. Otherwise, it becomes more frameworky and kind of like bare life is this concept that we need to avoid. But in a debate like this, where you don't have that, you really need to do the impact comparison. And the only place you do this, I think, is in the 1NC when you say magnitude, which it might be true that there are a lot of people who are living bare lives or lack value to life. But how does that, the amount that the AF causes, what is that amount, and who are these people, and where are these people, and what? I have a lot of questions about this impact scenario that don't get answered by the 2NR. And then as for the second option I gave you, which I think is winning the alternative, I don't think that you've won that it's mutually exclusive. You've said we should do class analysis, and I think the AF has said, well, we are class analysis. We think that corruption and the use of money in politics is bad, and that's in part for class-based reasons. So I think the AF wins the permutation. I think the AF is good. The NEG hasn't disproven that with the critique. On the theory debate, I ended up agreeing with the AF that there was no violation here, because the violation, at least the way I understood the interpretation in the initial speech, was that theory that constrains substantive strategies is bad if there's too much of it, and I don't think the AF did that. The AF said a whole resolution debate is bad, and I thought that was your best point in cross-ex as to what could potentially constrain substance. But the 1AR said, no, you misunderstand me. This is not to say if you engage in a whole resolution style debate, this is a reason you should lose. It is a reason that I'm justifying, it's a way to justify my own plan and my own AF. And so it's really defensive and warding off theory. And I think you could have done a better job of turning the impacts, because it's all education, right? And you could have said, like, these theory arguments are deterrents of theory debate, and so, in fact, allow us to have better substantive engagement. So that's my decision. Some other thoughts. I thought the 2AR, the 1AR I thought was great. I thought putting the kind of meh backfile cards at the bottom was the right call. Like, see if you have time, get them out there. I thought they could have been a bigger part of the 2AR because the 2NR doesn't line by line. But I kind of wrote down like what would be the conditions for the AF to win in the 2AR, and I thought proving the state is good. I thought the link turn, extending any of these drop cards, and then going for the perm. Those are the 4 things I wrote. I think you did 3 of those things because you didn't really go for the cards. You didn't really do state good either. Like, you kind of said like contingently good. I think you can just go for state good in this debate because, like you've said, like climate change, healthcare, slavery, the state was instrumental in stopping all those things. This is where the 2NR needs to be more specific.
Right,
Answer those And you know, I gave you this look in cross-ex when you were talking about the slavery stuff, because it's like, you know what, this is what they're gonna do. They're gonna say state good, and they're gonna have some examples, and you need to know how to deal with those examples. And your answer cross-ex, like, no, the state was the cause of slavery, and like, that's a great move. Or to say somehow the state made it worse, or they pretended to solve the problem, but they really didn't.
Yeah.
Like, those are all moves you can make, but I think you've got to go through pretty much all these examples and then have your own. Especially for like a high kind of abstract critique, it's really essential for me to get a grasp of your theory of power through the examples that you forward. I thought the strategy was good in the 1NC. I would have liked more engagement with the case in the case proper, and I think this critique can do that, because I think you can show that like attempts to stop corruption have failed, or there are ways that like nefarious big business can kind of find loopholes and circumvent them, or they can look good so that people stop investigating them. And if you could have had some examples about that, that would have been good. I also think having some case defense like that, that's more application of the K than just a cross application, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Would have been good, because the act doesn't really have an impact in this debate. Like, I don't know what it's just like corruption.
Doesn't have an impact.
Yeah, I know, it's not your fault, but it is a little bit. You contributed to the lack of an impact.
Yeah.
Like, at least try to have an, I don't know, you do you, but I think in this debate, if you'd had some good case defense, I could see a possible ballot for the K that says like, look, like, I'm not sure how much the act really solidifies biopower, but it does a little bit, and there's like a pretty big impact from biopower, and the case doesn't do anything. So yeah, I vote neg. Risk of biopower.
Do you have any ideas for like an impact for the app?
For this app?
Just like any app.
Well, why don't you go for? Yeah, I think there's IR stuff on this topic potentially, like Russia, like election legitimacy. Like if you had to disclose your ties to Russia or financial motives from Saudi Arabia, like I don't know.
Oh, I had a question.
Yeah.
I looked during like about a minute into the 2AR. It looks like you weren't flowing. Was that just because like you already thought I wanted to unmute?
Yeah. Well, the time skew stuff. I mean, I was listening. You are right that there was a moment where I was not flying.
No, I just wasn't sure if like you just wanted me to just stop and go to the K.
Well, I'm not going to give you any cues during your speech of what you know.
No,
you
I'm just
should
curious
do.
for like the future.
I think you should not read into your judge's behavior too much.
Okay.
That would be my overall advice. It depends on the judge. Like some judges will
Like
make it very clear. Yeah. I tend not to. But yeah, like you didn't. Yeah, the other stuff was kind of unnecessary. But and then the time skew weighing was especially unnecessary. Just because like first of all I think it was new.
Yeah.
So I was like for sure not gonna give it to you if it came down to that, and like also false. Like time skew just doesn't outweigh anything. So. All right. Good debate. Good luck.
Oh, I have one more question,
Okay.
just about like, not about this debate, but just about like debate as an activity. So
Okay.
I already ranted to you about.
Wait, hold on.
where